What do you need to know about the future of work and how it will impact the workplace? Because again, we are in a great resignation and all those other terms that I mentioned. So there is going to be an impact on the workplace. The first thing I will point to is the fact that remote workplaces, in my view, as a workplace strategist, futurist, are here to stay. Remote arrangements. You heard earlier that there's going to be some programming you folks have access to on LinkedIn. One thing to keep an eye on when you're searching for positions on LinkedIn is be very clear and keep an eye out for, is the position listed as remote, fully remote, hybrid, etc. Look that up, because remote workplaces are here to stay. And a lot of that is because people said, enough's enough. I am not going to be completely subservient to my career or to my job or to my industry. I am going to push back on things and say, well, why? Why do I have to go back to an office? Okay. Now, obviously, I fully understand that there are certain industries and jobs that you have to do in person. Absolutely, positively. Obviously, you can serve food from a remote location, things like that. So that's the first future of work trend and how it impacts the workplace. Second is the concept of a distributed team. You might be working in a workplace where people are in different time zones, people are in different states, different nations even, let alone the cultural impacts of that. So be very aware that speaking in terminology like Eastern time, which all of us, I believe, are here today, you might end up on a distributed team and you might have to adjust to the fact that you have someone in California, Hawaii, London, Buenos Aires, who is a part of your team. So you need to adjust to cultural differences, to time zone differences, and other such things. You also might run into a culture where the American concept, which came into play around roughly 1908, of a weekend, aka a 5-day week, may not be recognized. So you do not want to automatically assume and talk in the concept of a weekday versus a weekend, because that is only a 114-year-old concept, roughly. There were people before 1908 that considered 6 days and sometimes 7 days to be fully normal and expected. So again, it's a matter of reframing and understanding that the future of work has changed a lot of things, including the fact that a Saturday, even a Sunday, is no longer just automatically a weekend like it's been for some people since 1908. Also, the concept of repurposing space. I mentioned that earlier. So a lot of times, these buildings were built in a different era. In some cases, buildings were built before the internet age. So back then, of course, how did you communicate with people before the internet, right? You communicated by postal mail, you communicated by a phone that was usually attached to a wall with a cord. You communicated by walking up to a door. A little different, right? So a lot of times the space needs to be repurposed, but it's going to take some courageous, innovative people to say, I don't want to call you back under an RTO mandate because you truly need to be here. It's sort of like, well, we have sunk costs as a company, as an organization, so we want to use the space to its fullest utilization. Well, it's like, what if you don't want to do that? Well, you can become part of the big quit, of the reflection, of the resignation. And don't feel like you have to apologize for that, because the future of work is pushing people. And the trend lines, by the way, I didn't reference this on the slide, but the trend lines of migration are showing that people are moving further out from urban centers. Because as long as the internet, whether it's on a hotspot, on a mobile device, or on wired access, is strong enough to handle a video like this, you don't have to live in downtown or the first ring of Washington or of Richmond, Virginia, or Philadelphia, PA. You can move out into the suburbs, or there's a term that arose years ago called the exurbs, which is like a second or third ring. Or you might just move out and say, you know what, I've always wanted to live in the country. So that is a thing to keep in mind about repurposing of workspaces, and why exactly is there even an RTO to begin with. So keep that in mind, and why do you need to know and what do you need to know? These are some very important things.